On everyone. So Chris Paul and the Phoenix Suns still have a lot to figure out. The Phoenix Suns are still trying to see if they can get anything done before Chris Paul's contract becomes fully guaranteed on the 28th of June. There are all the reports that they have informed Chris Paul that they are very likely going to waive him, and that appears to be the direction that they're going. But, the Phoenix Suns are trying to do their due diligence before they actually officially do that. But I do expect in the next, week or so, Chris Paul very likely ends up getting waived. Depending in the approach on which they go about that, they could even potentially bring him back on another deal. But if they end up waiving him or buying him out and stretching out his contract or anything like that, then they can't for a year. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Chris Paul. He will be coveted. He doesn't have any plans of retiring. He wants to still play, and he's coming off of a solid season, right? I mean, he played 59 games this year, and in those 59 games, he still averaged 14 points, almost 9 assists at 8.9 assists, 1.5 steals, just under half a block per game, and he only has 2 turnovers per game. So he still takes care of the ball, still plays some solid defense. He still has the ability to knock down shots and hit from the mid-range, three-point shot. He shot 83% from the free throw line, so great free throw shooter. 51.3% EFG, which is really nice, and then shot 48% from 2-point range, and then 38% from 3-point range. So he's a guy that can still absolutely do a lot for several teams. And there are several teams that are actively interested in Chris Paul. Both LA teams, obviously the Lakers and the Clippers. The Boston Celtics make a lot of sense. The Sixers make a lot of sense. There could even be one of these young teams that look and go, man, we'd love Chris Paul to come in as like a mentor. So why don't we throw some money at him? Because all of the contending teams are only going to be able to offer him like a vet minimum, maybe at most like a taxpayer mid-level. So Chris Paul is very likely, his new contract is going to be somewhere in the $3 to maybe $6 million range. But regardless, he's going to have his options of where does he want to go, where does he want to land. And obviously the Lakers make a world of sense for Chris Paul. Chris Paul could go there. He could be a guy that that is trusted by his best friend LeBron James, right? LeBron James wants to play off the ball more. He doesn't want to be the primary facilitator and ball handler. And having a guy like Chris Paul, who he loves and trusts, would allow LeBron to maybe take a step back a little more. We already saw LeBron and his adjustments in that field of like, hey, let me take a step back. Let me take a little break. Let me let the other guys like Austin Reeves and stuff run the show here, and then I'll get my points sparingly, and I'll go get my 20 a game just throughout the course of the game. Well, if you had Chris Paul, he would definitely do that for Chris Paul. Chris Paul, whether he's starting or coming off the bench, obviously if the Lakers let's say Lakers sign Chris Paul for a vet minimum, which they could pay him around like $3.5 million, I think it is. So let's say they sign Chris Paul for the vet minimum. Well, now that gives them flexibility to maybe look for a D'Angelo Russell trade, to maybe bring in a solid big man or some shooting or maybe a perimeter guy. That would be nice. That would be solid. And then you have like Chris Paul who could facilitate. I know a lot of people are really concerned about bringing in Chris Paul because of his injury history and all that stuff, but there's a couple factors that go into that. One, he's like the second guy on the Phoenix Suns playing 33 minutes a game. He's not going to be doing that for the Lakers. He's going to be the third, fourth, fifth guy on the Lakers, maybe even further than that as far as the pecking order goes. He's also probably not playing 30-plus minutes a game, night in and night out. He's only going to have to play probably 20 to 25 a game, so that's a big difference. Also, he's played, like, so many people want Kyrie Irving, right? Like, a lot of people want Kyrie, and I want Kyrie Irving too, to an extent. I don't want the Lakers to blow up their entire roster to get Kyrie Irving, but like if you look up like Chris Paul the last few years and Kyrie, Chris Paul's actually been more reliable and played more games. So for like a lot of the people, I mean, even Damian Lillard and stuff like that, I can see so many people that are like, we got to get this guy, we got to get that guy. And look, I get Chris Paul is not the player that he was, but Damian Lillard and Kyrie Irving and all that stuff, those guys are all 30 plus million. You're getting Chris Paul for $3 million. It's a big difference. Even if Chris Paul does get hurt, let's say you sign him and he ends up getting hurt the third game of the season and doesn't play the rest of the year. It's not the end of the world. It's a vet minimum guy. You're only if you can get an opportunity to get a guy of Chris Paul's caliber for a vet minimum or even like a taxpayer mid-level, right? Like that might be the best deal in the entire league. It's low risk, high reward. If it doesn't work out, it didn't cost you anything. If it does work out, then perfect. You're probably winning an NBA championship. Not just that, but like, who are you going to get that's better, right? Like, seriously, who are you going to get that's better? But regardless, it looks based on countless reports that if Chris Paul ends up getting bought out, that he's going to the Lakers. That seems to be a foregone conclusion that Chris Paul is going to the Lakers. And we got several reports. So Devaney spoke with several executives around the league, and the Lakers seem like the unanimous favorites to land Chris Paul should he leave Phoenix. Also, Vegas and stuff like that have him as the favorites as well. Take that as you may. But Lakers first, one Eastern Conference GM texted him. It's not definitive. A lot can happen, but you'd have to start there. He always had the dream of being a Laker and playing with LeBron James. There is a lot that can happen there, and Eastern Conference executive told Devaney, the Suns need depth all over the roster. They want to free up their payroll. They want to see if there is a way to bring in Damian Lillard, which that ain't happening. They want to see what they can do with a DeAndre Ayton deal. There is a lot on the table, and the Lakers need to know where they are going with D'Angelo Russell. They're not just letting him walk. They traded a pick for him, and who knows if they could get Chris to sign a vet minimum deal or what. But if it is a straight kind of thing, just giving Paul the $15 million and moving on, and everything else is equal, it is hard to imagine him not going to the Lakers. That's basically the Phoenix Suns, right? Phoenix Suns, that's basically what Chris Paul's contract would be, the $15 million, and then Chris Paul just would go to Lakers for whatever, $3 million vet minimum deal. Maybe they do the taxpayer mid-level if the Lakers operate and keep their players and stuff and go that route, and then he gets like $6 million, so he'd get roughly $21 million this year, and then they can work out a new deal next year, especially with LeBron's contract could potentially come off the books. So if Chris Paul's great, maybe you bump him up to like $8 to $10 million, something around those lines. If it is what Chris Paul wants, being with the Lakers, it is what he is going to get. One Western Conference executive said he has a house in LA. He is getting near to retirement. He wants a chance to win. There's the LeBron thing. That's where all signs point to LA. So again, Chris Paul, by all intents and purposes, very likely is going to go to the Lakers. The Clippers, he played for the Clippers. Maybe he wants to go back to Clippers. I don't see it. Again, there's a lot of teams that really want Chris Paul. And there's a lot of teams that could really use Chris Paul, right? Boston is one that I mentioned, and they desperately could use Chris Paul because they need somebody that kind of can balance out that roster because Boston is just too predictable. But Chris Paul, he lives in LA, his family's in LA, everything like all of his marketing things and his commercials and all that stuff, he'd be closer to home. Like, it makes a world of sense for Chris Paul to go back to LA and go to Lakers. He'd have LeBron James. He basically would come in and be the point guard. He could be the starting point guard. He could be the backup point guard. He could be whatever. Preferably, at this point, I actually would love Chris Paul to be the backup point guard. I really would. I don't mind. Like, here's the thing, though, too. Even if he starts on paper, who cares? Right, because Chris Paul is very likely going to be closing games for us regardless, right? Because, late in games, you want a guy that takes care of the ball. You want a guy that, think of like Dennis Schroeder. Like, Dennis Schroeder closed games for us, and how many times did he just turn the ball over or make a silly play or just, whatever, or D'Lo, or, at closing games, you're probably starting Chris Paul regardless, right? Last 5 minutes or whatever of a game, Chris Paul, LeBron James are going to be on the court because they're your two highest IQ guys, two guys that take care of the ball, that are going to make the smart play, that are going to make the right play, all of that. So that Chris Paul is very likely going to be the guy that closes games. Him starting or not, I don't really care. It's more about the minutes he plays, right? Like if Chris Paul has to start, and you pay Reeves and you just tell Reeves hey, or you look to move D'Lo, right? You could do that, move D'Lo. All right, cool. But my point is that, whatever. If you have to go and hey, pay Reeves and go, hey, Reeves, we're going to bring you off the bench. I know you worked your way hard to the starting lineup, but Chris Paul has to start. Otherwise, his feelings are going to get hurt. And, but don't worry, you're still going to play your 30-plus minutes. I don't think Reeves would care. Reeves just wants his bag. Reeves just wants to play. He gets his bag. He gets to play, right? And then you start Chris Paul and you have D'Lo at the 2 or something like that. Preferably, if the Lakers do sign Chris Paul, I would like the Lakers to trade D'Angelo Russell, personally. I like Russell. Russell is a better long-term guy, right? Because Chris Paul comes in, you want D'Lo, right? But to have Chris Paul, D'Lo, and Reeves, it kind of feels like one of them has to go. Like, yeah, you could bring Chris Paul off the bench, right? Like, let's say Chris Paul is like, hey, I'm more than happy to come off the bench. I'll come. I don't want to mess things up for you guys. I will be the backup. All is good, right? Like, that would be great. But, again, at the end of games, who would you rather have on the court? Like, you want Reeves on the court, definitely. But would you rather have Chris Paul or would you rather have D'Angelo Russell on the court to close games? So, you probably want Chris Paul at this point because, again, guy that's not going to make mistakes, not going to turn the ball over. He can, operate and score at all 3 levels just like D'Lo can, but he's just the experienced guy, especially come the playoffs, right? So if you take those factors in, does D'Lo kind of feel the type of way? And then you ultimately have to trade him anyway. So why even put yourself in that position? I just think you got to trade D'Lo if you're going to bring in Chris Paul, and then you figure out your point guard situation once Chris Paul retires and LeBron leaves and all that stuff in the next year or 2. I think that's something. Or maybe you look to draft a point guard and then develop him. Or, maybe you start working out Scottie Pippen or Austin Reeves. Continue to grow and develop Austin Reeves as your point guard and go look for a 2 guard, a combo guard. Or maybe the Lakers draft that, or maybe it's Max Christie or whatever when you go to the rebuild. I just think if you're going to, Lakers are in a position to go all in. If you get Chris Paul, I think at that point, you push all your chips to the table, right? If Chris Paul comes over to the Lakers and you get him for, let's say the taxpayer mid-level, right? Which is like $6 million. I think you take D'Lo. I think you take Beasley. I think you take Mo Bamba. I think you take all of your second-round picks. I think you take all your first-round picks, and you find the best trade possible, and you go make that deal. Because at that point, you are playing for an NBA championship. You have Chris Paul. You have LeBron James. You have Anthony Davis. You have Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, Jared Vanderbilt, Max Christie. You take everything you have, push your chips to the table, and you go get 2 or 3 blue chip rotation guys. Can you go get a Buddy Hield and Miles Turner, something like that, right? And now you got Chris Paul, Austin Reeves, LeBron, Hield, and Turner. You got the best starting 5 in the league. There you go. And you'd still have a bench of, Buddy Hield, Rui Hachimura, Jared Vanderbilt. Again, you're the best team in the league. So do that, get it done, go all in. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, so I pass the question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? Do you think Chris Paul comes to Lakers? Like I said, it looks like it's inevitable. It looks like it's just a matter of time. Assuming Chris Paul does end up getting bought out and all that stuff. Maybe the Suns change their mind, but I don't see that happening. They have to buy him out. They have to. And that information's out there. So Chris Paul already knows. You're not going to go back on that. It's just that. And then do the Lakers decide to sign Chris Paul? Basically is how it's going to go. But anyway, love to hear your thoughts and opinions. Let me know.